Lisa, welcome to the Made Leader podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Jen. I have been looking forward to this.
Yes, well, if you can just give a brief intro of who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Lisa Sansom. I call myself a positive interventionist. I do leadership coaching, consulting, speaking, training, facilitating. I'm currently researching for my doctorate. And all of that is from a background of positive psychology. And I just kind of like to play in the space of helping workplaces be better workplaces, usually by working with leaders or with teams, but I'm always leveraging this background that I have learned and accumulated.
Yes, well, we're going to deep dive into one of the topics that I know you're researching. And
Yeah.
like I said before we started recording, this is one of my favorite topics to discuss feedback, giving it. And I always like to start with some misconception or myth.
Yeah.
So, what do you think is the biggest myth or misconception about delivering feedback in a workplace setting?
Yeah, I think there are so many. It's hard to nail down what the one biggest one is. One that comes to mind is that feedback is about what's going wrong. And so if I say to you, Jen, I'm going to give you some feedback, you probably automatically feel that defensive, yeah, like, don't give
Yeah.
that to me. Don't
With
want
it.
feedback. Because there's that feeling like I must have done something wrong. And my boss is now going to lean into me and it's going to be a horrible experience. But feedback can be about things that are going well. And that is something that I'm very curious about in my research. Another myth that came up in feedback when I was talking with people about this that I did not expect is that only bosses give feedback only to their immediate direct reports. And that also is not true. We give feedback to people all the time. I mean, even now, as we are having this conversation, I see you nodding, I see you shaking your head, I see, that's feedback to me. That's like, yeah, continue, or I'm engaged, or yes, that's a good point. So we're always getting feedback from everybody all the time. And another misconception I find about feedback in the workplace is that it's kind of a dangerous thing, right? Like
Mhm.
it is challenging to give feedback. And if we combine those first 2 points, that feedback can be about something positive and that feedback is all around us, it's probably easier to give feedback than you think. And a lot of bosses I talk to, they say, well, people should know when they're doing a good job. And the reality is, we don't. Especially somebody who's new in their job or new to their team or new to working with you, they don't know when they're doing a good job. And feedback, one of the reasons that I like it is because we can do it so quickly in little, short, informal moments. It costs nothing. I mean, all
Mhm.
these companies that are saying we have no time and we have no money. Feedback doesn't take very much time and it costs nothing. And yet it can improve engagement, trust, connection, productivity, like feedback well delivered and, of course, well received has so many benefits associated with it. So it's interesting that there are some myths out there when it is such a small, potentially powerful way of encouraging people.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions, and I find that it is mostly people think of negative and they
Hmm.
of formal, right? I need to give
Yeah,
you constructive feedback on something versus like just a quick coaching opportunity, right? But in thinking of it as like feedback is all around us in the conversations you have, I
yeah.
think too, just the word feedback is vague, right?
The word feedback is very vague. It is poorly defined in the research. And
Mhm.
I wrote a paper which isn't published anywhere yet, maybe one of these days.
Yeah, yeah.
But when people think about feedback, they think about the back, right? Like, let me reflect back to you what I have noticed. And I would encourage leaders to focus on the feed because feedback is for feeding people to help them grow and develop. I mean, this is why we feed kids, right? Like, we give them good, healthy food so they will grow and develop. And feedback is also about feeding. And I also like your point that we tend to think of feedback as being very formal, right? It's reserved for HR processes, it's reserved for annual reviews. And
Mhm.
in my research, I'm deliberately excluding annual reviews and HR processes. I'm deliberately looking at the day to day feedback that people receive in informal situations and asking employees to give me some insight into what's going on when they receive that. So, yeah, I mean, so many misconceptions out there.
So why did you decide in your research to exclude formal? Because a lot of times that's really what people get. It's the only time they get it, right?
I know.
And
And that's,
Gallup has the research on meaningful feedback that it's not only not given, but when it's given, it's really not meaningful to the person.
uh,
So why did you choose to focus on just you said that the day to day, the more casual interactions?
yeah, there are so few studies out there about what is actually happening in the day to day in the workplace. So when I was reading the research to create that groundwork and that literature review for my research, what I noticed is two things. Number one, if there was research done in the workplace, it was typically around formal performance reviews. And that is because that's a very neat way of studying feedback. It happens at a certain time of year. The same manager is meeting with different employees over time. You can assess what's going on. You can survey people going into the meeting. You can survey coming out of the meeting. It's very contained and makes for some nice, potential research. Um, and so I didn't want to do that. I wanted to find out what the daily experience is of people because most of our working lives, we are not in formal HR review processes. Also, I am a little cynical about HR review processes, and most managers do not look forward to them. Most employees do not look forward to them. They are quite often seen as HR check boxes and, as you say, not very meaningful. So I wanted to find out what's going on in the day to day and is that more meaningful? The other piece that you mentioned is that a lot of people do not get feedback outside of those processes. And I wanted to
Mhm.
research that as well. I wanted to find out how often are people getting feedback or what they consider to be feedback. Because managers will sometimes say, oh, I give feedback all the time. And employees are like, nope, nope, haven't received any feedback in the past week. And so there is a mismatch there. And I wanted to find out from the employee perspective, what do they think is going on? Because that is useful information for managers to know. What is your employee's experience of receiving any feedback from you at all? And so I have some participants who are just, one of the questions in my survey is, did you receive feedback today from your manager? And I have participants who are saying, nope, 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 nope. Now, maybe their manager is giving it and they're not receiving it, but I am very interested in the employee experience. And then I have some employees who have great leaders, lots of great feedback. And it's really interesting to see what differences that creates for the employee experience.
Well, I'm just thinking of day-to-day feedback. I mean,
Yeah.
some days you may not even talk to your employees. Like if
Yeah.
you have a large team and it's remote or hybrid, or even it's in the office. I know some people that work in the office, but their offices are separated in buildings, right?
Yeah.
So it's easier not to give it just because of the busyness of the world. But what I find with leaders is that they definitely don't give it enough. Like it's not on their radar to give it. They do think of it, even not in formal HR processes, but even just, I'm going to leave it to the weekly check in or I'm going to leave it to the one on one. Where I often catch leaders is they'll tell me good things about what someone's done. And I always say, have you told them?
Have
Well,
you told
no.
them?
They're like,
Yeah.
I'm like, right now, right? So sometimes like I coach leaders and we go through some of the people having performance problems or, certain types of performance issues. And then I hear, oh, that person's doing it well. I was like, well, don't forget them, right?
Yeah.
And everything that is going on, you need to help let the rest of the team know what they're doing well because people want to feel like they're seen and valued. So that's feedback is yes, it's not given enough. That's for sure.
It is not given enough. And I do have questions in my survey to find out if people are working remote, working in the office, working hybrid. If they're in the office or hybrid, what percentage of the time do they actually see their boss in person in the same location? And when people do receive feedback, I'm asking them what was the channel that they received that feedback through. Because there is some research showing communications generally are more effective when they're done in real time, in real person. Those communication
Mhm.
rich channels are much more impactful when it comes to creating relationships, for example. So if you see people face to face or in a video conference or even in a telephone call, that creates connection way more than a chat message, a text message, a Slack message, anything like that, or emails. And so I'm going to be looking to see how people receive the feedback and what the impact of that might be. Now, all of this, of course, is presuming that I get enough data to crunch on that. If everybody tells me that they got in person feedback, or if everybody tells me that they got email feedback, I can't really pull that apart. But as my database grows, I am hoping to learn about different ways of working and different ways of delivering feedback and to see what seems to be most effective.
Are you still looking for data?
Oh, always. The research
Okay.
is never done. Yes, I am going to be doing most of my number crunching in about a month or so from the date of this recording. But I am always collecting data. And one of the things that I have started to offer out there is organizational reports. Because eventually, I think organizations need to understand what their specific feedback culture is, and you can imagine that in different organizations or even different parts of an organization, there might be different ways of delivering feedback that are going to be more impactful for those employees who are working there. And I think, again, that's something that I haven't seen other people talking about so much. And
Mhm.
so I got really curious and interested in researching that. What does that
Mhm.
feedback culture look like?
Yeah, and we'll make sure we get the information, your information in the show notes so people can
Oh, sure.
contact you if
Thank
they
you.
wanna participate. But let's walk through what what I don't know, call it good feedback. I know Gout calls it meaningful feedback. What do you like effective? We'll just use effective for the sake of
Effective.
this.
Yeah.
Effective feedback, what does that look like? And I want you to help us in 2 different facets. One, you
Mhm.
just mentioned the environment, kind of real time, face to face, whether that is over, a call, a virtual call, or in person, that piece, but then also wording. So what works?
What works? Um, there's a lot of research out there about what works. And what I find interesting is what works for any sort of feedback, like whether it's got a negative content or a positive content. What works seems to be about the same, which I am also testing. But in the lab studies out there, where they kind of like bring people into a lab, give you a task to do, and give you contrived feedback on it, whether that feedback is about something that went well or something that went poorly, the same criteria seem to apply. So the first question is, does the employee in this case trust the feedback provider? Do I think that my boss, my manager, is a good source of giving me feedback? Do I see my boss as caring? Do they care about me as a person? Do they care about my growth and development? And are they competent at their job? Are they competent at giving me feedback? Do I think that they are the right person to give me feedback? And so that trust has to be in place. If I don't trust my manager, if I don't respect them, if I don't think they care, if I don't think they're competent, I might comply and listen to the feedback. I'm unlikely to do anything about it. So that relationship is a really important precondition. Then to the technical parts of the feedback, we want to make sure that it is timely, right? You don't want to be waiting 2 weeks to tell somebody something that they did, good or bad. We want to make sure that it is as specific as possible. Behavioral feedback works much better than, let's say, general praise. I also coach high performing people, and I have had clients say to me, if my boss tells me good job one more time, I'm going to quit because they're not growing, they're not developing, they're not getting anything. Like, what about that was a good job? And high performers want to know, what can I improve? Because they're already good at doing whatever it is that they do. So that takes me to the third part, which is that feedback needs to be tailored and individualized to the person. That gets to the environment. Like, how does somebody like to receive feedback in public or in private? What channel do they like to receive it through? Now, I will say if you need to talk to somebody about improving their performance, in person or as close to in person is better, whether that's a video call, whether that's a phone call. But telling somebody that they did something well, that can be done in a whole bunch of different ways. So think about how people like to receive that feedback, and it needs to be individualized to them. What is it that they did? What's working for them? What is it that they need to grow in? And again, managers to be able to really reinforce that piece, like, I care for you. I am giving you this feedback because I have high hopes and high expectations for you. And I think that you can continue to do really well or that you can do better. And this is all meant to be encouraging, supportive, and that relationship, that individual relationship that they have becomes really important. And so managers can tailor their feedback to that person. The other thing I would say for managers is just, check in on yourself, giving feedback when you are in a heightened state of emotion. Like if somebody recently did something and you're very annoyed with them, yeah, take the time.
Yeah,
Like
calm down.
if you gotta weigh your own mindset against timeliness, go with your own mindset. Make sure that you are in the right state of mind and that you're the right person at the right time to deliver that feedback.
Yeah, and I find that when the leaders give it, asterisk when they if they give it,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
it is that specific piece, and I find that in my experience, leaders are much better at giving specific constructive feedback. But like
Mm,
you said, it's very general with positive feedback. Hey, good job.
yeah,
Right? Because I used to hear that and I was like, it's exactly what you just said. Like, okay, cool. What can I improve? Right? Like that's where I want to. That's where I'm looking at my feedback. Right? And it just the specificity isn't there. Like exactly like what I was saying. Like, have you told that person what you just told me, or how, like, why does it matter that they are doing this? And it allows frees you up to do other things, so just getting as specific as possible. But yes, it is just
yeah.
making the time to do it, and making it part of your regular routine.
And being thoughtful about it and taking the time to prepare, especially at the beginning, because it's going to feel weird. It is a
Mhm.
skill like riding a bicycle, and it's going to feel very wobbly. And you're going to be looking at your feet pedaling instead of at the road, and it's hard if you don't have that practice already. But it does get easier. I remember one client I had, his boss wanted him to presumably behave differently in meetings. And I had a meeting with the boss and I said, like, what is it that you want in terms of coaching goals for this client? And the boss said, I would like him to learn how to read the room. Like,
So
okay,
so helpful.
right? And so I asked the boss, I said, what does it mean by reading the room? And the boss explained to me kind of like her take on reading the room. I'm like, great. What is it that my client would be doing or saying that would help you to recognize that the client is actually reading the room? And the boss was silent for a long time, had never really thought about that before. And it's not about like what would other people be doing or saying, like, Joe manager comes to the boss and says, hey, your employee really read the room well. Like, what is the employee doing? We have to get to that level of behavioral specificity and to be able to explain what's important about that. Now, the boss did come up with some ideas. I did work with the client on it. We did make behavioral changes. The client did learn how to, quote, read the room, but we had to get to that level of behavioral specificity in the feedback. Otherwise, my client would not have known what to do.
Yes, I love that example because I find especially higher level leaders get super frustrated because they're like, "Oh, I've told them they need to learn how to read the room,"
Right.
with no follow-up. Thank God you had you as a coach, but is usually don't get that, and then they just get more and more frustrated, and that person never excels. Or I've seen it in the sense of, I'm talking to the senior leader, and they're being very specific with me. This person needs to X, Y, and Z. Oh,
Yeah.
have you told them that? Yeah, I've told them. I promise you, they have not told them as directly as they just told me.
And that's the key. It's that directly. And I find that, and you probably find the same thing, like our clients will say things, they kind of blurt in coaching sessions with all the confidentiality and everything like that. And that's what they need to be saying to their employees in a very kind, caring, supportive way, but using very clear language like that.
Yes. All right. So you just talked about two things that come up with
Yeah.
giving feedback ineffectively, being vague, right?
Yep.
That was one. And you talked about making sure it's timely. But where else have you seen giving feedback go wrong?
Oh, one of the fun ones is when managers give feedback in a team. We all need to. We all need to make sure we're doing documentation. We all need to make sure that we're closing down our projects properly. We all need to follow policy. We all need to. What happens when managers are doing this? Managers think they're being efficient, right? I got my team of 7, and rather than having 7 one-on-one meetings, I'm going to tell everybody all at once. So first of all, I mean, you might give very specific details. You might say, here is how we do our documentation, and you might get very specific about it. But out of those 7 people, you probably have a lot of people who are thinking, yeah, you other people, you need to do better. And then you have somebody who is thinking, oh my God, they're talking to me. I'm not doing my documentation properly. And they're not the one that the boss intends to be addressing. Because usually it's your higher performers, your most conscientious employees, the ones who are very perfectionistic, who have very high standard and want to do a good job, who have that inner critic in the team meeting who pop up and say, oh, it's me, it's me, it's me. And the boss is thinking, no, it's not you, it's this other person. But the other person is oblivious. They have no idea that the boss is talking to them. And so I would say to managers and leaders, if somebody needs to hear that they're not doing something well, just sit down and tell them you're not doing something well. Don't bother the whole team with it. If 6 out of 7 are doing okay, talk to number 7.
That
Don't just
is
give it at a team meeting.
Lisa is literally the worst. Like, I despise it. I'm like losing my mind over here. Yes, they don't want to just address the
Yeah.
one person. It is one person on their team. And instead, they'll bring in a training for everyone. And you're like, for the love of
Right.
God, like, no, it is this one person. It's a quick one-on-one. Here's how you need to do it. Oh,
Yes.
okay. That gets me. It's such a waste. It's
Yeah.
a waste for
And
everyone
then
on your team.
and managers think that they have given the feedback. So then later the managers say, well, I told them. Like, but did you? Did you really tell them? No. Let's admit you didn't really tell them.
Or what did they hear? Right? Because
Right.
even you can say, I told them, but I think it's helpful to say after you give feedback, well, what did you hear? What are you
Yes.
taking away from this?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you sometimes you can be completely direct and they're taking away something else, or they started tuning you out at point 2 or however long you were going on. So
Yeah.
yeah, I find that most aren't being as direct or saying, like, actually telling them is clearly. But secondly, it's just it doesn't matter what you say, it's what they hear.
Well, and then I think you're getting at another point, which is around the whole feedback conversation. And in my research, I found a lot of models on how to deliver feedback. So, for example, you may be familiar with the SBI framework, which is a good framework as far as it goes. And just for people who are not familiar with the SBI feedback model, the S is the situation, the B is the behavior that you observed in somebody else, and the I is the impact that it had on you. So in the weekly meeting, that's the situation. You showed up 10 minutes late, that's the behavior. And I was very worried about you. That's the impact it had on me, just as a very simple kind of example. It's good as far as it goes, but it doesn't invite any conversation at all. And so managers need to lean into, so you were late, that's objective. Is there something going on that I should be aware of? You're usually on time or you're usually late. What's happening? Is there a way that we can make sure that you are on time more often in the future? I know that you want to perform well, right? We want that supportive piece in there. How can I help? What is it that you need? What would make this easier or better for you so that you can succeed the way that you would like to succeed? And let's have a conversation about that. Let's
Mhm.
ask some really open, genuine, thoughtful relationship building questions to help you do better.
Yes, I've created my own framework called IDEA because the SBA,
Nice.
I just feel, yeah, you need those tangible pieces, but it's
Yeah.
also like, what do you think? Like, does that track with you? It
Yes.
has to be this discussion because otherwise it's just someone, like you said, giving it, and you're only one view. So what if
Yep.
you have it off? What if you're off base, right?
Which you
Um,
may well be. I mean, managers are not infallible. You might be wrong. And then it is very important to have that conversation so that you are building trust.
Right. So yeah, I like it's great for people to start with SBI just to give them something to get them
Yeah.
to that first, the specificity. And I always like saying the impact to that person, right? So how are they impacting their reputation in the company or what their goals are with the company, right? Or the career
Yes.
goals. Like I know it's important for you to, you know, get to that next step. And when you show up late, it doesn't help people have any faith that you can get to that next step.
Which is an
Um,
important piece. I know we're talking about like what managers can actually do when you're giving feedback and you know what the other person's goals are. Like, I know that you're angling for this
mhm.
promotion. I know that you want to be promoted to, senior manager. I know that you want to take on this other project, whatever it is. Here is something that will help you do that. Let's align our goals. I support you. I encourage you. And if you want to be able to do that big important thing that's meaningful to you, here is something that you can take away on that, and let's work on it together to help you
Mhm.
have that success.
Yeah, because most people, even if they don't wanna go to that next level, most people wanna be seen as reliable and doing a good job,
Of
right?
course, of course. I know your reputation is important to you. I know it's important that people respect you when you speak up in the room. Here are some ways to
Mhm.
help you do that.
Yeah, so leaders getting to know what their people's goals are really important.
Yeah.
So, we talked, I think it was a year ago, Lisa, and one of the things that
Wow.
you said really stuck out to me that I wanna bring back up.
Okay.
That you brought up a nuance about giving feedback to someone who is newer in their role versus more seasoned or experienced in their role, and not career-wise, just role specific.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through that nuance?
Yeah, and this is not my research. I can't remember off the top of my head whose research it is, but I can find that out for anybody who's interested. And it was this really interesting nuance around novices and experts. And when somebody is new to a task, let's say, so they might have, like you said, 10 years of experience in the company, but they're taking on, a monthly report for the first time. So they're new to a task, they will benefit more from positive feedback. What is it that they are doing well? And the reason the researchers suggested that novices prefer positive feedback is because they need to have their commitment shored up. They need to know that this is the right thing, that they're dedicating the right amount of energy to it, that they are on track. They need that encouragement in order to help them with commitment. But at some point, and you can think about athletes, you can think about speaking and presentations, at some point you get pretty good at doing what you're doing. And you don't need to be told anymore that you are doing a good job. That feels pedantic, it feels patronizing, it feels like the pat on the head, good
Good
job
job.
kind of thing,
Mhm.
right? And so at some point, that employee becomes an expert. They have a lot more mastery. And then they are ready for here's how to make it even better. Here's what did not go well, or here's how you improve your performance. And quite often, those are nuances, right? And it's little things like don't look down at the paper so often, or move your arm this way, or whatever. It's very, very small things. And especially if somebody wants to dedicate themselves to really honing whatever that task is, they're going to thrive on that feedback about how to make them even better. And so that positive feedback, really good for the newbies who need that encouragement and to shore their commitment to the task. And then at some point, managers, this is why you need to stay attuned to your employees. Your employees are going to start asking for, yeah, but what can I do better? And then they've reached that tipping point, especially if they're asking for it.
Yeah, I just thought that was so interesting, and I've got a leader right now dealing with the same situation, trying to get their newer employee up to speed on certain projects. So I thought this was one to bring up. Um, but speaking of early leaders, I've been working with them
Mm,
a lot. They're probably my favorite group of leaders to work with. And they tend to be hesitant about giving feedback, right? They're new to their role. Maybe they're managing peers. But it's not often they've never had to do it before. And now it's a job of a leader to create that culture of feedback. So, what is your advice for early leaders? They have tons of tips to go back to, right?
yeah.
But what's your advice for these early leaders to give feedback successfully?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that we have spoken about, make sure that that relationship is in place. You want to have that good relationship before you need to start giving feedback on anything. So, walk around, get to know people, ask them about their days, right? Create those relationships, get to know their goals, like we've talked about. Ask your employees, not necessarily what their 5-year plan is. I mean, I don't know how
Who the
anybody
hell
makes a
knows?
5-year plan on anything. I just ask them, like, where do they see their career going? What do they enjoy about the work that they are doing now? What other opportunities might they be looking forward to in the company? Whether that's projects or whether that's roles, just get to know them a little bit. And so create those relationships first. And then when you do have to provide feedback, I would say start with the easiest ones first, right? You're learning a new skill. You don't learn how to ride a bicycle on the middle of the interstate highway at rush hour. Like, just not a good idea. You're going to go to like some empty parking lot and go real slow and maybe have somebody hold on to the seat for you. So when you're starting to give feedback, maybe start with the people who you feel you have the best relationship with first. Start by saying something nice, say something that is positive. Don't do the sandwich feedback. I mean, we didn't even talk
God,
about
no.
that as a myth, but I think a lot of people know by now, like, do not sandwich your feedback. Just
Le-
say what you need
They
to say. Yeah,
they know, but there's companies that still do it.
I know.
So
I know.
just for everyone's knowledge, the sandwich is when we call it crap sandwich. You say something nice, you say something constructive or negative, and then you finish off with something positive. So people walk away going, "What the hell just happened? I
Yeah,
have
I'm
no idea."
very confused. And what happens is some people who have very, very good senses of self esteem, they'll come away and they're like, two good, one bad, 2 out of 3, I'm doing fine. And they didn't even hear the bad thing. So, yeah. And then you've got people who will just fixate on the one bad thing and they're so confused. Am I doing well? Am I not doing well? I don't know. And they're too intimidated to ask because they feel like they should know. So, just say the thing you need to say. And if you need to prepare ahead of time, that's fine. Take some time, jot down your ideas, talk to a coach, talk to AI. I mean, just find somebody or something that's going to help you figure out what might be the way to approach this. And then I'm also a fan of something that I call buffer phrases. I don't know, Jen, if anybody uses this or calls it something else. But basically, if I'm going to give you feedback and it's something that might be a little awkward and I'm not sure if it's going to go well, I'm going to tell you, Jen, I have some feedback to give you. I'm not sure if this is going to go over the way that I intend it to, but is it okay if I try and give you some feedback? This does a couple of things. First of all, it allows you to have a say in the timing of the feedback. Is this a good time for you or not? The other thing it allows you to do is kind of get your defenses ready. It's like, okay, Lisa, I don't know what weird thing you're about to say to me, but I have taken a deep breath and okay, bring it on. And whatever I'm going to say is probably not as bad as what you're imagining, anyways. And then I can ask you for feedback on the feedback. And I can say, Jen, like, here's this piece of feedback. It's kind of awkward and it's kind of weird, but I really want you to know this thing. And I like you and I trust you and I think you're great, but you need to fix this thing. I'm like, Jen, how did that go for you? And I make you a partner in giving feedback on the feedback. And because we have that good pre existing relationship, I can learn from you about how to deliver feedback, and you are learning the feedback that I actually want you to learn. And so I would encourage new managers to find people you can practice on feedback with.
Yeah, I mean, role playing, like when I talk to leaders and they're in class, like we role play, right? Because you have to
Yeah,
say it a few times so it's not super awkward. But what you just said earlier, I mean, you give a lot of ideas for new leaders to handle feedback effectively. But one of them I don't want to bury is establish trust with your team.
establish trust.
It's the relationship. You don't need to go in there guns ablaze and giving a bunch of feedback. You can
Yeah,
just say, get to know them, right? Because that
yeah.
give them start with and layer in some positive feedback, what you're noticing that's going well, and set the stage for when it needs to happen, that critical feedback, and it probably doesn't need to happen right away.
It
So
usually
trust.
does not. Now, let's acknowledge that sometimes there is somebody who's never had a lick of feedback in their life, and everybody knows that they are the problem child at the organization, but nobody has told them for whatever reason. You're hired as a new manager, and they're like, you, Jen, deal with the problem child.
Yep.
And it's still important to establish that trust, get to know that person, sit them down, and just say, hey, I know you have been here a long time. Tell me about you. How do you work best? What can I be doing as the boss for you? What are you looking forward to? Like, let's get to know each other first. And how do you think you're doing around here? Right? Like, let's have a real conversation. I'm not suggesting all of that in 5 minutes. That's a ridiculous conversation to have in 5 minutes, but
Yeah.
over time and be a person. Just be a
Mhm.
person supporting people.
Yes. Yes, just be human. Care
Yeah.
about the person. If you care about their growth and development, that'll come across. You know, before we close out, there is one thing that usually happens with new leaders is they start getting feedback from their team. And that's what you want. You want that cycle and
Yeah.
that culture of feedback. But what advice do you have for leaders when their team's like, "Okay, well, let me give you some feedback." And it's maybe not the it's not the positive type of feedback.
Yeah, I would. So first of all, I would say to leaders, preempt that by asking for it. And if you're new to leading your team, one of the things that leaders will often do is set up a series of one-on-ones just to get to know people. What is it that you're doing? All those sorts of things. I would encourage leaders to throw in a question about what is it that you need from me to be a good leader for you? How will you know that I am doing a good job? What are some of the frustrations that you are dealing with that I can help you with? And how can I be really effective for you at doing that? So, again, like, let's just establish that. And then ask them, how am I doing as a leader for you? Here were some of the things that you said you were looking for. How's that going for you? And I would say get that feedback as much as you can in the one on ones, because that is when people are more likely to feel that they can speak freely. If you've got a whole group, of course, you've got the group think, and people might feel that they, can't speak up if they have differences of opinion. So ask for it at first. And then if you have somebody who, like you said, Jen, is like, well, I got a thing to tell you, get curious, right? If you can just like take a breath and realize that their engagement is way better than their disengagement. They're giving you feedback. That means that they are noticing. They care about how you show up. They care about your relationship. They care about them doing a good job and you doing a good job. Lean into it as best as you can. Ask some questions, take some notes. And even if you vehemently disagree with it, right? This is not the time to like go through point by point and debate everything. You just take your notes and say, I really appreciate that you have given this to me. I'm going to take some time. I'm going to review it. I will circle back to you with any questions. And then let people know what you've done as a result of the feedback. So, Jen, you gave me feedback on this. I'm going to take a week. I'm going to think about some new things that I can do. And I'm going to come back to you and say, Jen, here's what I've thought about. Here are some of the things that I have tried. Here are some of the things I'm thinking about trying. What do you think? Like, let's have a learning conversation
Mhm.
about that. So, as much as possible, lean into it. Now, there are going to be some things that you disagree with. Like, I have
Mhm.
seen leaders receive feedback that leaders need to be much more involved in the day to day details. And the leaders are like, no, I don't. That's your job. That's not my job. Have that conversation. Explain why you disagree and why you trust them to be doing their own work, for example. and what it is you will be able to do for them. In some ways, feedback, those ongoing learning conversations can feel a little bit like a negotiation. And there's going to be a little bit of give and take because it is, in some ways, right? It's those opinions and it's those thoughts. But if we get back to our common goals, which is we're trying to help people do better around here, you'll find a way through. It just might take some time and some conversation.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too, getting clarity where you don't understand, right? Because people can
Absolutely.
give you feedback and you're like, you go, okay, great, thanks. And you're sitting going, what did they mean by that? So I always encourage them to go back and say, what did you mean? Can you give me another example? I'm not clear here. So I like what you're thinking. Just take the time, think about it, and don't hesitate to say, I'm not sure what you meant by that.
Yeah, ask for clarity, ask for specifics, ask for
Mhm.
examples. That's why third party feedback can be really hard, right? So, like as a manager, sometimes you receive feedback from clients, from vendors, from peers, from other people, where like you need to tell your employee this, and you haven't observed that yourself. That's really, really hard to manage because a natural question from the employee is going to be, well, who said that?
Mhm.
Give
Mhm.
me an example. And so, as much as possible, we want to make giving feedback directly a norm around the organization. And that's what I'm hoping to help people do with my research.
Yes, yes. No triangulation. I would say,
Um,
mm. Yes, we could talk about feedback all day, but in the interest of all of our time, Lisa, where can people find out more about you and reach out?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn. My name is Lisa Sansom. I think I'm the only Lisa Sansom who does coaching in like the province of Ontario. I kind of bubble up to the top on that. Or my website is lvsconsulting.com. And either of those work as a way for people to get a hold of me.
Well, I will link those up in the show notes. But Lisa, before we close out, is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with? Anything I didn't ask you, or just something you want to end on?
I would just encourage leaders to give it a try. Start in an easy place with a relationship where there is trust. Start by noticing people doing things well and just letting them know that they did something well, and then get out of there and see what happens. And I do encourage people to reach out. Clearly, I love talking about this. And so if anyone does have any questions, please reach out and let me know.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Jen.